They call her Bloody Mary. To some, she's just a childhood dare. A whispered name in the dark during sleepovers. A ritual performed in cramped bathrooms lit only by flickering candles. But to those who claim to have seen her, she is far from a harmless story. The legends surrounding her stretch back centuries, spanning continents, blending history and horror into something that refuses to die. The idea that mirrors are more than simple reflections is ancient. In many cultures, a mirror is believed to be a portal, a fragile boundary between our world and a place where spirits dwell. Victorian households would cover mirrors after a death in the family, not merely as tradition, but to prevent the soul of the deceased from becoming trapped inside. In some Native American and Asian beliefs, mirrors were avoided at night altogether, for fear that something might look back. Bloody Mary's story grows out of these fears, an amalgamation of mirror superstition, ghost lore, and perhaps something much older. The earliest whispers of the ritual appear in rural England in the late 18th century. But back then, the summoning was not meant to call a vengeful spirit. Young women would walk backward up a staircase at midnight, holding a candle and a hand mirror, in hopes of glimpsing the face of their future husband. In some versions, they saw a coffin instead, a sign that they would die before marrying. Over time, the ritual warped. Some began to tell of a wronged woman, her face mutilated or burned, whose spirit could be drawn into the world if her name was spoken. By the 19th century, the name Mary began to appear in ghost stories. Sometimes Mary Worth, a witch accused of murdering children. Sometimes Queen Mary I of England, known as Bloody Mary for the executions of Protestants during her reign. Others claim the legend may be tied to Mary Tudor's own tragedies, the phantom pregnancies, the paranoia, the deep grief that supposedly bound her spirit to the mortal world. But historians argue this is unlikely. The real Bloody Mary was feared for politics, not sorcery. Still, folklore thrives on drama, and the name stuck. They call her Bloody Mary. To some, she's just a childhood dare. A whispered name in the dark during sleepovers. A ritual performed in cramped bathrooms lit only by flickering candles. But to those who claim to have seen her, she is far from a harmless story. The legends surrounding her stretch back centuries, spanning continents, blending history and horror into something that refuses to die. The idea that mirrors are more than simple reflections is ancient. In many cultures, a mirror is believed to be a portal, a fragile boundary between our world and a place where spirits dwell. Victorian households would cover mirrors after a death in the family, not merely as tradition, but to prevent the soul of the deceased from becoming trapped inside. In some Native American and Asian beliefs, mirrors were avoided at night altogether, for fear that something might look back. Bloody Mary's story grows out of these fears, an amalgamation of mirror superstition, ghost lore, and perhaps something much older. The earliest whispers of the ritual appear in rural England in the late 18th century. But back then, the summoning was not meant to call a vengeful spirit. Young women would walk backward up a staircase at midnight, holding a candle and a hand mirror, in hopes of glimpsing the face of their future husband. In some versions, they saw a coffin instead, a sign that they would die before marrying. Over time, the ritual warped. Some began to tell of a wronged woman, her face mutilated or burned, whose spirit could be drawn into the world if her name was spoken. By the 19th century, the name Mary began to appear in ghost stories. Sometimes Mary Worth, a witch accused of murdering children. Sometimes Queen Mary I of England, known as Bloody Mary for the executions of Protestants during her reign. Others claim the legend may be tied to Mary Tudor's own tragedies, the phantom pregnancies, the paranoia, the deep grief that supposedly bound her spirit to the mortal world. But historians argue this is unlikely. The real Bloody Mary was feared for politics, not sorcery. Still, folklore thrives on drama, and the name stuck. The first documented mirror death, linked to Bloody Mary in America, appeared in 1872 in a small Illinois mining town. A 14-year-old girl named Annette Harper was found in her bedroom with shattered glass scattered around her. Her younger sister testified that Annette had been playing the mirror game with friends the night before. They had dared each other to call Mary's name 13 times. The sister claimed she heard scratching noises from Annette's room and the sound of dripping water, though no source was ever found. Annette's face was described as pale and her eyes wide open, as if frozen in terror. Reports like these were scattered, small enough to be dismissed as coincidence, until the 20th century, when the ritual entered the mainstream. By the 1970s, teenagers across the United States knew the name, Bloody Mary. The rules shifted depending on who you asked. Some said 3 chants, others 5, others 13. Some insisted you needed a lit candle, others that the bathroom lights must be turned off after the final chant. What never changed was the warning. Once you start, you cannot break the ritual. Police reports from the 1980s show an odd pattern. Cases of vandalized school bathrooms, smashed mirrors, and faint traces of water pooled beneath them. In a high school in Ohio, 3 students were suspended after being caught on security cameras performing the ritual in the girls' restroom. They left screaming, claiming that the last mirror they faced breathed before cracking. The janitor who cleaned up swore that the glass was icy cold despite the school's heating system running at full blast. Some folklorists dismiss these stories as mass hysteria, a product of teenage imagination, fueled by horror films and peer pressure. But others point to unsettling consistencies. Across decades, the sensation of hair being pulled, the sudden chill in the air, the faint outline of a woman in the mirror who should not be there, and in certain cases, physical traces are left behind. The most infamous recorded case in recent decades took place in 1994 in a small town outside of Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. A group of 4 teenagers gathered at a friend's house during a thunderstorm. According to surviving witnesses, they decided to test the Bloody Mary ritual in the upstairs bathroom. The power flickered during their chants, but they continued. On the 3rd repetition, one of the girls screamed, claiming she saw a pale, black-eyed woman behind her reflection. The bathroom light went out entirely. When it came back on seconds later, the mirror was cracked from top to bottom, and one of the girls, Michelle Parker, was missing. Police searched the house, the yard, even the crawl space. No sign of her was found. Her friends swore she hadn't left the room. The official report listed her as a runaway, but locals still whisper that she's behind the glass. Paranormal investigators who have studied the Bloody Mary phenomenon say the entity described in witness accounts shares disturbing similarities. Worldwide, witnesses speak of long, tangled hair, sometimes wet, sometimes clotted with something dark. Her eyes are deep-set and hollow, or completely black. Some claim she appears mutilated, her face twisted as if burned or slashed. Others report that she moves too quickly, darting from one edge of the mirror to another, vanishing before she can be seen fully. In many accounts, there is an overwhelming smell of iron, the metallic tang of fresh blood. In Japan, similar stories exist, though under different names, such as Hanako-san or Kuchiseki-onna. In Russia, urban legends speak of a spirit named the Bloody Bride, who is summoned in mirrors during wedding rituals gone wrong. Folklorists suggest that Bloody Mary may be part of a larger, global pattern, a single archetype of a vengeful female spirit, adapted to local culture. If this is true, then the ritual may be far older than the name itself, stretching back into a time when mirrors were rare and sacred. One particularly disturbing modern case was documented by an amateur paranormal group in Toronto in 2010. They set up cameras in a rented apartment and performed the ritual 3 times over the course of a night. The first attempt yielded nothing. On the second, one member claimed to see movement in the mirror but dismissed it as imagination. The third attempt was different. The footage shows a shadowy figure moving behind the reflection of the participants, even though the actual room behind them was empty. At the end of the video, a loud crack is heard, and one of the participants stumbles backward, clutching her face. She later revealed deep scratches along her cheek that appeared instantly and bled heavily. No one in the room had touched her. Skeptics argue that all such incidents can be explained. The human brain is wired to recognize faces in random patterns. Mirrors can create optical illusions, and in dim light, our eyes can trick us. Fear heightens these effects, making people see what they expect to see. But what skeptics can't explain are the consistent physical anomalies. Mirrors cracking without impact, puddles of water that appear from nowhere, and sudden temperature drops measurable by instruments. Some researchers have even attempted to measure electromagnetic changes during the ritual. A 2017 experiment by a small university research team claimed to detect significant fluctuations in EMF, electromagnetic fields. When the Bloody Mary chant reached its final repetition, the readings spiked in short bursts, the kind typically associated with high-energy discharges. The researchers were unable to reproduce the exact conditions in later tests, leading some to believe they had inadvertently opened something briefly. While most people will never experience anything beyond a shiver and a laugh, there are those who warn that the risk isn't worth it. They say the mirror is not a passive object but a threshold, and once crossed, you cannot choose who or what comes through. Some of the most disturbing accounts of Bloody Mary are never reported to the public. They live in whispered conversations between police officers, paramedics, and night shift hospital workers. A retired detective from Chicago, speaking under anonymity, once described a case from 2003 involving a young woman found unconscious in her apartment bathroom. The mirror above her sink was shattered outward, as if something had forced its way into the room. The woman was rushed to the hospital with deep lacerations on her arms and face. When she regained consciousness 2 days later, she refused to speak. She would only scribble the words, "She's still there. She wants more." The official police report labeled the cause as self-inflicted wounds during a mental health episode. The detective, however, insisted that the shards of glass had been blown away from the mirror, not inward, as they would be if she had struck it herself. In 2015, a video briefly surfaced on a paranormal forum before being removed. It allegedly showed 2 college students attempting the Bloody Mary ritual during a live stream. The first few minutes were typical, laughing, chanting the lights off except for a candle. But around the 7th minute, the stream began to glitch. The audio warped, producing a low hum. Viewers claimed they saw something pass quickly behind the girls in the mirror, something tall and hunched. One of the students turned suddenly, gasped, and dropped her phone. The feed went dark. According to the forum's moderators, the original poster deleted their account within hours, and neither student has appeared online since. Attempts to track them through university records came up empty and as if they had never been enrolled. There are also accounts where the ritual is said to have lingering effects. A case in 1989 tells of a man named Gerald who, as a teenager, had attempted the summoning with friends. They had chanted her name 13 times and fled laughing when nothing happened. Weeks later, Gerald began complaining of feeling watched whenever he was near a mirror. His family noticed him avoiding bathrooms entirely, even covering up reflective surfaces in his room. 2 months later, he was found dead in his bed. No signs of struggle, no apparent cause of death. His mirror, however, had fogged over despite the room being cold. Written in the condensation in thin, jagged letters was a single word: mine. Occult researchers sometimes link bloody married to the concept of mirror spirits, or reflected entities found in old grimoires. These writings warn that mirrors can store energy, particularly fear and intent, and that certain rituals can awaken what's trapped within. Some even speculate that Bloody Mary is not a ghost at all, but a parasite of sorts, a consciousness that feeds on the attention, belief, and terror of those who summon her. If that is the case, then every repetition of her name, every ritual performed, makes her stronger, more aware, and more capable of crossing over. In the deepest corners of the internet, there are claims of two-way mirrors that act as permanent gateways. These are not the kind found in interrogation rooms, but rather ordinary-looking mirrors that have been claimed by Bloody Mary through repeated rituals. People say you can tell if a mirror has been marked if its reflection feels slightly delayed, or if you notice small details that don't match the real room, a chair out of place, a shadow where there shouldn't be one, or the faint outline of a face behind your own. Those who believe in her most strongly insist on one rule above all: if you start the ritual, you must finish it. Breaking off mid-chant is said to anger her, leaving the door open without closing it. And if that door remains open too long, she doesn't just watch from the other side. In 2007, urban explorers in Detroit broke into an abandoned high school set for demolition. The gymnasium was stripped bare except for one thing: a large, ornate mirror bolted to the wall of the old drama classroom. The group decided to test the Bloody Mary ritual on camera. They chanted 3 times and nothing happened immediately. But in the footage later reviewed, a faint, skeletal hand can be seen pressing against the inside of the glass, leaving streaks as if smeared in condensation. None of them recalled seeing it during filming. 2 weeks later, the mirror was removed for disposal, but the demolition crew claims the glass was missing when they came to take it. The wall was bare, the bolts still intact. A traveling salesman in 1998 checked into a roadside motel in Nevada. Late at night, unable to sleep, he looked into the bathroom mirror and swore he saw a woman standing directly behind him. He spun around. No one was there. He stayed awake until morning and left without showering. Days later, a rash appeared on the back of his neck, shaped like long, thin fingers. His doctor diagnosed it as an unexplained skin irritation. The salesman insisted he hadn't touched anything unusual, except for that motel mirror. In 1974, a family in Brighton, England, bought an antique mirror at an estate sale. Within weeks, the youngest daughter began complaining that the lady in the glass was angry at her. She described a tall woman with matted hair and red eyes that moved like fire. At first, her parents dismissed it as an overactive imagination, but after finding deep scratches on the girl's arms one morning, scratches too long to be made by human nails, they stored the mirror in the basement. When the father attempted to sell it, he discovered his photographs of the mirror always developed with a distorted face in the frame, regardless of angle or lighting. Forest rangers in Oregon stumbled upon a hunting cabin that had been abandoned for decades. Inside, they found dozens of mirrors nailed to the walls, each covered with thick black cloth. On the floor, written in chalk, were the words, "Don't say her name." When the rangers removed one cloth to inspect the glass, they all reported feeling violently dizzy, as if the room had tilted. One ranger said he heard faint, wet breathing directly behind him. But the cabin was empty except for the mirrors. These fragments, scattered across decades and locations, have one unnerving thing in common: the descriptions of the woman never vary. Whether in a city apartment, a rural farmhouse, or an abandoned building, she is always the same: tall, pale, with hair that hides most of her face, and eyes that glint with something between hunger and fury. The consistency of these details even from people who have never heard the legend before, is what keeps the Bloody Mary myth alive and feared. While most people today know Bloody Mary as a party game or childhood dare, the roots of the legend are tangled in centuries of superstition, execution, and whispered curses. Some folklorists trace the name to Marianne of England, the infamous Bloody Mary, who ruled in the mid-1500s, known for the brutal persecution of Protestants during her reign. She earned her nickname through the execution of hundreds by burning. Though historians insist there's no evidence she was a witch or spirit, the human mind has a way of sewing real-world terror into the fabric of myth. In time, Mary Tudor's bloody history became entwined with older European beliefs about mirrors and spirits, and a new, darker figure was born. Older still are the tales of mirror-bound entities found in Eastern European witchcraft and Romani folklore. Some of these stories describe women accused of sorcery being executed in front of large mirrors, so their spirits would be trapped forever in the reflection. Over centuries, the details morphed. Some versions say Bloody Mary is the restless ghost of a murdered woman seeking revenge. Others claim she is the embodiment of all women wronged in life, drawn to those who summon her with their voice. In the occult, there is even the theory of mirror resonance, that repeated names and intent can weaken the boundary between worlds, giving something on the other side just enough strength to cross over. Psychologists, on the other hand, try to explain the Bloody Mary phenomenon as a combination of sensory deprivation, expectation, and the Troxler effect, an optical illusion where staring into a fixed point for long enough causes the brain to fade out surrounding details, sometimes replacing them with hallucinations. In a dark room with fear already heightened, a participant's mind might conjure a distorted face in the mirror as a projection of their own subconscious fears. But even these explanations falter when faced with reports that leave physical evidence, scratches, fogged messages, or missing persons. In 2021, an amateur paranormal investigator from Toronto decided to livestream himself attempting the ritual in 13 different locations over 13 nights. The first few streams were uneventful, jokes, candlelight, the occasional nervous laugh. On the 10th night, he was in an abandoned asylum bathroom when something in the stream caught his viewer's attention. As he chanted, the reflection's lips began moving out of sync with his own voice. It smiled, wide and unnatural, while he kept speaking. The chat exploded with warnings, but moments later, the feed cut to black. His channel has remained inactive ever since, and his friends claim they have not heard from him in years. Perhaps the most chilling aspect of the Bloody Mary legend is that it never seems to fade. Every generation rediscovers her, resummons her, and in doing so, breathes new life into whatever she truly is, whether she's a spirit of vengeance, a prisoner of glass, or a parasite feeding on fear. Her presence thrives on repetition, and each chant, each daring child in a bathroom late at night, is another knock on the door between this world and hers. The question that remains is not whether she is real, but whether you would be willing to look into the glass and find out.